Okay, so I'm presenting some work that we've done called the Great Big Online SoTL or Scholarship of Learning and Teaching Compendium. So this session is a little bit different than just a presentation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have a minimal presentation, and then I'm going to invite everybody to contribute to the online SoTL compendium. In whatever way you fancy, either by improving what's there already or by adding something new and things like that. So this is much more a kind of like making session. So who we are, it's Phil, Helena and James, Phil McAleer, Helena Patterson, James Bartlett, and we're at the University of Glasgow. We are also very interested in making open educational resources for people, but all of us are interested in research, scholarship and research. So we are learning and teaching focused academics, all three of us. And one of the things that's required of us is that we do scholarship of learning and teaching. When we first came to doing this kind of research, we found that we were a little bit lost. It's a bit hard to do this because very often the terminology and the ideas and things like that are not the same as from our research disciplines. And recently, when we were talking to colleagues, actually quite a lot of people are in that situation. So one of the things that we thought could help would be to make some kind of glossary of the different scholarship of learning and teaching terms, things that we come across that that we find in papers that we need to talk to colleagues about, especially when we're working cross-disciplinary. Because sometimes our research, and I don't know about you, but we're encouraged to do our research across disciplines within our college, within our university, and with colleagues elsewhere. So very often when I'm presenting to an audience like EmpowerED, which has people from many disciplines, rather than to other psychologists like myself. So one of the challenges, of course, with something like this is that we do need a common shared language. And that can be quite hard to come by in scholarship of learning and teaching. That we haven't found one kind of like really easy to access resource that just tells you what all these sometimes very unfamiliar terms mean, and also some of the methodology that we come across can be very unfamiliar compared to our own disciplinary methods. One of the things that we wanted to do was make a space where we could learn from each other, where we could learn from colleagues within our university, but also colleagues without. And so we came up with the idea of making this glossary. So before looking at this, we had to look at other kinds of glossaries that are out there, things that are called glossaries of learning and teaching, and also glossaries of scholarship of learning and teaching. And I found a few, they're linked there. I can actually probably copy the links in a minute and send so you can go and have a look. But a lot of these are focused on the hidden curriculum, making visible to staff and students some of the hidden things that you can see, like for instance, what is a lecture or what is a seminar, or all kinds of things like that. So there's quite a few dictionaries out there or glossaries out there that does that. And then there are very subject specific ones. So within our school, there is or within our discipline, there is a group of people interested in open science and open scholarship, and they've made a really nice glossary of terms to do with open science scholarship. But of course, that is quite discipline specific or area specific. And so we were kind of like, well, that's not quite getting there. But if we wanted to if we wanted to encourage anybody to adopt open science practices, this would be the glossary we would go to. And then there are a few slightly more wider ones that are, like, for instance, the Washington Glossary of Pedagogical Terms. But again, that is fairly subject specific. So what we wanted to look for was something interdisciplinary and a living, updating, continuing to develop glossary of terms. I mean, we were already starting to think about it as a compendium rather than a glossary. And how did it go from being a glossary to a compendium? Well, that happened in the very first session like this we had. So the very first session we had, we came up with a broad ideas of what we wanted to do, and we took it to our learning and teaching conference, which was split into small 2-hour workshops rather than presentations, and a number of people came to our workshop, and it was a making session where we got colleagues to, and we as a group we all decided what we wanted the compendium or what we wanted the glossary to contain, and then we started thinking about things that, well, a glossary is actually not good enough. We actually want some additional things, like maybe a space to share resources, a space to share case studies, a space to share links and things like that, and that looks much more like a compendium. The other thing that is different with a compendium, so each entry might not be the same as all the other entries. It's not just a word and a definition. There might be additional things there, but also something else we started thinking about was the controversies in the scholarship of learning and teaching, that there's not always agreement about terms. So a person who comes to this might actually look at it and go, actually, I don't agree with this term. I don't agree with another term. So here is the process that we'd use. We quite like this, and we might adopt it for some of our teaching as well, because it was a really great way to make a collaborative resource very, very quickly. Our goal was to make an open educational resource, and the method we used was through making a quarto book. So these are online books that you code, or you have to code. Now, the reason that we went in this direction is because we actually have a whole suite of online open educational resources already that all three of us are part of creating and curating and things like that, and that's called the SciTeachR. And SciTeachR is where we share our curricula for, we make resources for students, but we share our curriculum more widely that way as well. So we already had this platform and the skills in order to do this. So when we set it up, we wanted to use this again. On the day, we set up a Mentimeter, which is software for capturing, basically audience participation software for capturing our initial learning and teaching terms, or scholarship of learning and teaching terms that we wanted to include. And colleagues just sat and they made up terms. So that's the activity that we can do today as well. And we made a framework for our open educational resource that we were going to use. And then we made a GitHub space where we could host it. And in order to capture our entries, because we knew that everybody wasn't comfortable using coding or using GitHub or using a Quarto book or using RStudio or any of these things. So we made a Google Doc for capturing things. And so what we did, we captured our initial Mentimeter terms. From Mentimeter, you can actually download an Excel sheet with all your terms, and we had a little code, a little R script set up to take those terms and turn them into our compendium. But we also did some other things. So in the group, we did additional things, which was for everybody to say what it is that they want the different what are all the elements of different entries. Once we had done that, we incorporated all of that information and made our Google Doc that you'll see in a minute, that we're going to be doing that. At the end of the session, we rendered that. Now, since then, we've introduced another thing. We would be editing. So, for instance, today we will make the terms and we'll do things like that, but I'm not necessarily going to publish it online until we've done a little bit of editing. So James and Phil and myself, we now call ourselves editors on the compendium rather than authors, because everybody who contributes is an author. So this was the initial terms that we came up with, and there's quite a few there that people wanted to talk to. We had a great range of individuals there, including learning technologists, experts in active learning, experts in assessment, and things like that. So even within that room already, we came up with many different entries and many different ideas, and it's already rich just from the fact that there's quite a lot of terms already there. each of these entries, we also had some additional things that we were interested in. So for everything, we're going to capture contributor details because we want you to be part of the whole thing. And then for each entry, we have the term. So for instance, you can see this one is about assessment. This is one that I'm working on or have been working on. Then there's a short definition. So just a sentence, the short version of a definition. And then you can have a longer definition because sometimes we want to add additional things. Like for instance, here I was looking assessment, and maybe I should also put in there formative assessment. I haven't added anything like that, but you want to have a little bit of a longer definition. And then we have this deep dive section, which we'll talk about in a minute. Contributor section and any tags. We don't have to add tags. That's something that us as editors will do, that we can later add tags to make the book more flexible for using. What is the deep dive section? And this is something that we came up with at the Learning and Teaching Conference, or with our colleagues, that everybody was like, look, first of all, people aren't always in agreement about the different terms in scholarship of learning and teaching. So we need this extra space to add debate, to add ideas, to add additional things. So a future author can come along, or a future contributor can come along and see an entry and add some additional examples, for instance, or refine it a little bit. So controversies or alternative definitions as well. So some terms have more than one definition or aren't very well defined, so people come at it from different perspectives, where we can also add examples. So examples of teaching, links to maybe an empowered talk, or a podcast, or a resource that you have shared somewhere on Figshare, or in a large I can't remember what you call them, place where they collect different resources, or papers that you've published. Repositories, that's what I was looking for. So there's lots of opportunities for us to add to enrich entries in the compendium using this deep dive, and we thought that this was a brilliant invention and takes it so much beyond a glossary. Once we've rendered it, it looks a bit like this. It's very similar to before, but it's there. We've got our main term, we've got our method of assessment. We've got our short term, we've got our longer definition, etc., etc. And I can take you. I can, in the chat, you can go and have a wee look, but I can take you to. I'll just move this over here. I hope you can see the compendium. Should have appeared for you. Is that right? So this is the compendium. It's called. Okay. It's still called a glossary, so we still need to update the name at the top on GitHub. But here it is, hosted on GitHub, and this is what it looks like. And we were very proud that this. We've got our contributor section, so this will now be added to if everybody here wants to start contributing, and we've indexed our different terms. So the other thing about the compendium, which I would encourage you to link to. Okay, I'll explain about the tags in a moment, is that you can go to the index at the end, and you can see the terms that have already been started. So these are terms that there might be already something in there, and might need addition. So all of them could do with additional work. And then you can see terms that we thought would be interesting to add that haven't had much added to them yet. Okay, so there's those. Now, when we open the Google Doc, you can see that is there. So we're collecting together people's ORC IDs. Ideally, if you contribute here, please put your email address so we'd be able to contact you. And you can see there are the entries. If we go to the end of the document, sorry, don't get seasick while I go to the end of the document. There are plenty of empty spaces where we can add additional terms. Oh, not at the end yet. Yeah, so there's additional terms. If you've come up with a term that you want to add, you can just copy this. Sorry, copy the 2 lines, add it to the end, and say, look, there's some more terms. I want to add some more things. We can just add additional parts. And so when we got together with everybody, we realized that there's quite a lot of different kinds of things. So somebody asked in the chat about the tags, and we haven't fully settled on them. I'll give you the ones that we have at the moment, but we did have things like pedagogical terms, technical terms, scholarship terms, hidden curriculum terms, methods terms. You could have statistical methods, you could have quant methods or qualitative methods or anything like that. But so the tags haven't been completely decided. You can add your own tags if you want to, but I can, in a moment, before we end, I'll show, before we go to the next bit, I'll show you, I'll just paste the tags that we had already thought about. And yeah, so now we're going to get to a making session. So we'll do that. So Anshul, how long? We've got about 40 minutes. Is that right?
Yes, 40 minutes.
Yeah. So there's questions and answers, but I'll encourage you guys to start making. I can answer the questions already, but please start adding to the Google Doc, and that's what we'll be doing for the next few while. I'm going to work on it to improve some of this stuff, enrich some of my entries that's there. Later on, I'll have a wee editing thing, and then I'll contact everybody who's contributed to let you know when we've uploaded it, when we've made the big thing. Yeah, go.
Just for a little help for our participants, can you even show what is expected? What are we doing again? That would be really helpful.
Yep, no problem. So for instance, one of the things we can do is, for instance, here we have an entry called VLE. Okay, so virtual learning environment. So the short definition here is VLE, a online platform for sharing lectures. Now that is not the best of definitions. You probably want to add a little bit more to that, but a long definition can be, for our school, would be people normally think slides and discussions such as Moodle or Blackboard.
So when they are, all of us are putting here all that long definition, deep dive. So I'm just confirming, how do we check what words are already there with you so that we think of any new word, basically, not to repeat basically what's out already there?
You don't. So we already have in the compendium. We already have the words that people have already done. So you can, so if you come up with something, so Anshul, do you maybe have something, an idea of something? You could put EmpowerED there.
Yes, absolutely. That's a good suggestion.
So you can add that there, and you can just go to the compendium, look at the compendium and say, is EmpowerED there already? No, it's not there already. So I'm going to add a new term at the bottom. Or you can say, well, actually, I know quite a bit about active learning. What I'm going to do is just check what's there already. So go into the definitions, and they're all alphabetical. The top ones are alphabetical at the moment. So go into the definitions and say, well, somewhere at the top in the A's, it's a long page, or you can, I mean, Google is good. You can do a find, and you can do a find. Oh yeah, there's active learning, and you can see, okay, somebody's made an entry there. But, you know, I know more about active learning. I could add some additional stuff there. You know, so you can say something like that. I'm going to add. Once you've done that, you would just add your name next to Vicky Dale's name, comma, and add your name because you contributed to it as well. As I say, we'll go through. The Google Doc has versioning on it, so we'll be able to change. You know, we'll be able to double check what has changed and things like that. So that's for us editors. Does that make a little bit of sense? So you go to the to here. Yeah. Any other questions?
If anybody have any questions confirming around what we are supposed to be doing, please raise your hand and ask directly. I think I am somehow clear on what I'm doing.
Okay, I've got there the compendium, so you can go and have a look yourself. I've got there the Google Docs, but feel free to ask questions, to chat, to come on screen and do this if you wanted to do that. What was the other thing I was going to? No, I don't think I had anything. Oh yes, I was just going to share with you the tags we have already. You can always suggest more tags. If you wanted to suggest terms you want me to add at the end, just type it in the chat. I'm very happy to keep adding terms.
And
And
in,
here are the. I'm just going to find the tags for us.
I think this Google Docs, I can see some of them are literally only term, but there is not
Yes.
short definition, long definition. So are these pre-populated for us, or is it somebody is
So
not
this is
basically?
pre-populated from the original term. So sorry, I'm just putting in there the tags we have. But of course, we can make more tags. So the point is that it's a community-generated thing. That
Okay.
we're not, it's not just one person that's going to do this. It's actually everybody takes part in shaping it. So for instance, the tags are something that can still be shaped. The original terms were, remember I shared that Mentimeter output, that Mentimeter word cloud. Those were the original terms that were generated by delegates on the day. And so that was one of the things. So we put everything from what people said that initial day in there, but that won't be everything that people would want to
Yeah.
add. Yeah. And I would encourage you. So, for instance, if you've written a paper, if you've written a scholarship paper, go there and have a look at some of the definitions that you use there, and bring it in, and then you can add that as a link. You know, and so it's another way of people sharing and surfacing their work as well. So we're hoping that it's going to be a real community effort.
That's really helpful.
Farine asked, who are the primary users of the compendium? Do you have a target audience in mind? It's actually anybody who wants to engage in scholarship of learning and teaching, because that is the community that we started joining as we're discipline specific academics, but then we came into uh, we became more oriented towards learning and teaching, and as part of our contracts it's expected that we do scholarship of learning and teaching, but that is not something that any of us were trained in, and it's something that we found very new. So it was a little bit of a struggle for us to figure out exactly what is scholarship of learning and teaching, and so we wanted to make something that would help people new into this kind of research just figure out a little bit about what it is, give you inspiration, especially when we can link papers or examples.
And also, I put a question up there. Who was involved and how do you decide, or did you decide in the first which terms or concept made it into the compendium first iteration?
We weren't picky. We
Okay.
basically had, it was all our colleagues that were there, and we're going to continue not to be picky. So anybody here can add terms and say, I think this is a term, and we're not going to vote on it. We're not going to do anything like that. Those are terms that the community decides
Yeah.
are reasonable for this. If we find terms, so for instance, that one of those glossaries that I linked to was the Open Scholarship Glossary. If we find terms that are more suitable there, what we would probably do is we would say, look, there's already a definition elsewhere, and we would make a link to that. Or we'd encourage people to make a link to that rather than to recreate. We don't necessarily need to recreate things that are already there. But we were also kind of like, we are psychologists, but I work with people in veterinary science, for instance, and for them, and people in medicine. So for them, things like problem-based learning is something they understand very well and use a lot, whereas I don't use problem-based learning. Um, I use group work, for instance, but some of my colleagues had never really used group work, and so for them, they sometimes struggle to understand, what are the terms associated with that. And so there's various different things like that. We found that as soon as we start thinking about our colleagues and what they do, we realize that there's many different things we don't know. And if you want to work in a cross-disciplinary way with colleagues, you do need to add some things, some additional things in there. You need to find ways in which you can find a common language. So we're hoping that this is going to grow into a common language and understanding.
Thank you so much. And as you suggested, I've literally been expanding on empowered.
Perfect. Right, I'm going to go in.
And
I'm going to be quiet now.
and for others who have not been joined later, I just want to explain that Helena has shared two links. First to a compendium where you will be able to see index and resources, and next one is Google Docs. If you scroll towards the bottom of the page, you would be able to contribute any term, pedagogical term, or anything related to education that you feel could be contributed. It could be a term or it could be any unit, anything that you feel would be relevant for the educators widely. You can explain the term, short definition, long definition, deep dive, contributor. Just leave the tagging part because that will be to do with I think, Helena and her team. Am I right in explaining that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, perfectly. I'm sorry. And you feel free to tag if you want to, but that's not necessary. The only other thing that we ask is that you make sure that you add that you're a contributor at the very top of the document, because we use that in the compendium to say who are the contributors.
Yeah.
We want real people to contribute.
And when we are actually filling up, there is also an option of contributors. So that is basically what would that incorporate?
So on each term there's also contributors, which is kind of like, so that would be the name of the people in the big contributor list who actually worked on that entry. So you see the first one, accreditation, there were two people had worked on that. They actually worked on it together. They collaborated on it together. And then later on, so in active learning, there's only one person who contributed to it so far, but I'm probably going to add some extra stuff in there, or somebody else might add some extra stuff in there. Like, for instance, you can add a case study, you can, a link to a paper or anything like that, and that would be an additional thing there.
Yeah, I was lucky. I've got some context already on our website, so I've literally pulled up some of it, long definition and deep dive from there, and short definition I could write. So, do the people get confirmation whether what they've contributed and how would it work?
Yes, if you put your email address up at the top, or your org ID would be able to find you like that, but we do need to be able to find you. So at the very top there is we call it the roll call. So what I can do is, yeah, so if you put your name and your email address in there and your org ID, we can find you that way.
Okay, perfect. And can we add more than one term if possible?
Yes, you can add loads of terms. You can add whatever terms you like. As I say, we will do a little bit of an editing, or you can contribute to any of the terms that are already there, because we just haven't. This is the second time that we're doing something like this.
That's perfect.
Voting it.
Because,
and sorry, go on.
Because I was saying that there's gamification mentioned, but I can work on game-based learning.
Exactly.
Which is very relevant to education.
Exactly.
So some of them are not completed. So do you complete it afterwards or?
Nope, that's going to be community done. So please feel free to add. It's going to be a labor of love over time. So we're hoping that we bring more and more people up to speed about the compendium and that they will add to it.
And what is the expectation going forward? Will it be published somewhere or website particularly, basically?
It's probably going to stay as an open educational resource. We may move it to a different place at some point, but there will always be, from the original, there will always be a link back to say where it's going to go. Once it finds its permanent home, it will have a DOI attached to it, which means that people can use it for scholarship. So you can basically say, I was a contributor on here, and there will have evidence. So we're hoping that it's going to not only be an opportunity for people to use it, but also for them to take it into their scholarship, saying, "Oh, I've contributed to this. I've contributed to that." I'm hoping that maybe it can become a permanent part of EmpowerED. Every once in a while, people say, "Look, we've had 10 talks. Let's put some compendium items together."
Yeah, absolutely. We can link it somewhere on our website, maybe. And add some little explanation. If somebody wants to contribute, they can go there and add
Yeah,
whenever they come across something new. Or I would suggest if we are doing that, you should look into Power Automate, that they can use a form to complete and that auto populate something. But it'll also, you will be also notified if somebody has added something. We in fact had a session in the last session, somebody introducing what is Power Automate, how it works for educators. That
yeah.
would be very simple, efficient, and structured. You will be able to see a Excel and detailed information on what people have added terms wise, as well as information on who has added, and also it'll pre-populate something, a document for you.
Yeah, no, I think we've always, because coding is something that we're comfortable with, we've always gone the
Okay,
coding route. So Power
okay,
Automate,
okay.
so it's either direction, but when we
Okay.
did it, we used the tools that we already had available, and code, as I say, coding is something that we're very comfortable doing,
Yeah, that
because it's
makes
something
sense.
we teach, whereas Automate is the it will do the same if you
Yeah,
don't code it.
absolutely.
Yeah. Although probably as we move on, perhaps we do need to start thinking a little bit about that, because then we could open it and people could add things and we would know when that happened. But we could ask that people have to identify themselves, and we would literally just not take any changes that didn't have an identified person with it. Yeah.
Yeah. If you still haven't gone onto the document that Helena shared in the chat, make sure you access them and maybe see what other people are adding. If you do not want to add anything, it'll be a good opportunity to hover over the what are the terms that are there. You might be familiar with some, maybe not. Or can we add to other people's thing that they have contributed?
Yeah, feel free to add to other
Yeah,
people's. I mean, one of the things that you could do is you could come, for an entry, for instance, say accreditation. So that was very much the people who did that were very much kind of like focused on Glasgow University accreditation,
yeah,
and they put some things in there that I don't even know what they are. So this was business. This was the business school people. So I would probably come in there and say things like accreditation for BPS, British Psychological Association
yeah.
or Society, or medical accreditations or things like that. So that's one of those entries that you can actually expand on quite a bit. And if you take the writing from elsewhere, make sure that you acknowledge it properly, say where it's come from. So for instance, if you take a definition from your own paper, preferably your own and not anybody else's, make sure that you fully acknowledge where that came from with, you know.
So what would be the difference between actually like deep dive and long definition more over the same, am I right? Over like overlapping or something
Yeah, I think
somehow.
there might be some overlap. The deep dive is about, if there's kind of controversy associated with
Yeah,
something or something deep, it can be empty. Any of them can be empty, so you can say, well, there isn't really a long definition for this. I don't actually think there is anything additional to contribute here. Or there might not be a deep dive. It might be an actually very well established term. Um, we would always leave open the opportunity later on for somebody to add to the deep dive. But yeah, there's probably going to be overlap. We would probably go into um, uh, other things, like for instance, there's some short definitions that to me look like very long definitions in there already. So I would probably go in and do a little bit of an editing job and move those
yeah.
things around.
And how do you see AI impacting this kind of contribution? Because literally somebody can go on AI and ask, these are the words which are already on the website. Give me all the pedagogical words in this format. So like overnight, it could be overnight revolution, but not without many contributors particularly. Because I know the essence is people contributing, not just the focus on words. Am I right?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, if somebody did want to take it into an AI and get it to generate all
Yeah.
of these definitions, I wouldn't have much of a problem with that. But it can't do the deep dive. That's why we've got that.
Yeah.
It can't do the long definitions and the deep dives. Um, you're going to get. So yeah, Peter's going to get chatty job. So I often, like, for instance, I'm sitting there looking on control groups, and I'm like, I know exactly what control groups are, but I'm now feeling lazy about writing it all out. Do I even have a deep dive on control groups? I don't really. This is something I can maybe start something on methods or things like
Yeah,
that. But I think if you don't know about the term, if you don't feel that you know about the term, then don't contribute to it. If people want to use AI to help them, or they do a Google search to help them define the term and stuff like that, that's perfectly fine. But, verify it, check it. Because that's what we'll be doing afterwards. We'll be going in and checking, and we do know the people who are on it. So the other thing that we will do, as I say, there's versioning on this. So Google Docs have versioning, so we can roll it back to a previous version if somebody has just done a very generic thing on it. But yeah. I was thinking, one of the things that I was thinking was that I could take some of, like, my preprints, for instance, and put them into something like Alim Notebook, and get it to get all the definitions out of that, and that would give me the short definitions for things, and then I could actually go into my paper and figure out a little bit of what would I add into the deep dive or the long definition here. So yeah, so those are the kinds of things. But
yeah. Just if in case you don't want to type, you can even use the dictation feature in Word as long as you're muted on Teams. You can even use dictation and even type, like speak and type, if that
yeah,
helps. What impact do you hope to achieve, Helena, from this compendium, and
fame and
that you
fortune,
think,
of course.
and that will have impact on particularly early careers academics starting out in scholarship on
Yeah.
learning and teaching?
Yeah, I'm hoping that is going to impact them. But it's an opportunity for people to contribute scholarship, for you to have an output that's out there in the world, that people can see, and also for more experienced people to kind of, like, do this little bit of a deep dive for us to learn a little bit about scholarship of learning and teaching, so that we can help people to just improve this, to just get better at it. Because, as I say,
Yeah,
it's quite I'm still struggling sometimes to figure out whether I'm doing scholarship of learning and teaching, and having interacted with people who are very successful at that. It's been absolutely fantastic because they bring their ideas in, um, and we wanted to find somewhere to contribute,
yeah,
to collect that,
yeah,
somewhere that we could bring a community together in doing something like this. And also, of course, there are events like Empowered, or at
yeah,
conferences and places like that, where we could take this as quite a nice making session. So normally
yeah,
when we would do this in person, it would be kind of like, in a room together, and people would start chatting over
yeah,
scholarship of learning and teaching ideas. And
yeah,
very soon, as soon as you start getting people chatting over these things, they start forming
yeah,
collaborations and stuff like that. So those are the kinds of things that we're hoping to get out of it. Literally discussion spaces,
yeah.
places to add things, add controversial terms in there, because that gets a discussion going as well. Um, Things like that.
And what role could students play in shaping or contributing to the compendium?
Well, we hadn't really thought about students adding to this compendium, because it is supposed to be about career development and things like that. But however, the process that we have used, where you get people, because it was very quick. I think we had, don't think we had 2 hours. I think we had an
Okay.
hour or maybe an hour and a half in that thing, and we went very quickly from generating that word cloud. By the end
Yeah.
of the session, we actually had the compendium made, with some of the terms already populated. So, for instance, we were thinking in a class, you could use this as a collaborative activity. Think about that, and part of the thing was the group talked together about what they wanted to include in it. So that already shaped a little bit
Yeah.
about what we believe scholarship of learning and teaching is. So
Yeah.
there wasn't a deep
Absolutely.
dive. There was a short, there was a a term and a short definition and a longer definition, and then out of the discussions with the group came, well, I think we actually need to have this deep dive thing. We need to have a little bit extra and those opportunities, and that came from the group. So these are, so when doing an activity like this, for instance, in a classroom, say you're teaching. So this morning I was teaching on social psychology, and we were teaching on the South. And
Yeah.
part of that is that students go away and they have a choose your own adventure on a reading that
Yeah.
they do, so they can choose something from the course and they can bring it back. So I could set up something like this where they all come back
Yeah.
and contribute terms, and then start working on definitions with of those. And we would say, well, in this particular
Yeah.
space, what would
Yeah.
be the things that we'd be interested in.
Yeah.
So for
I,
this particular one, it might be anybody engaged in scholarship of learning and teaching. So for instance, students who are, if you have a staff-student partnership going, the students would contribute the same as staff. They're scholars of learning and teaching.
yeah.
So,
And just to confirm, how much time people have, or do you have additional presentation continue,
nope,
or
I
do we
don't have
review the
any.
do we review the contribution? What happens next now?
So the next thing that will happen is we'll run our code and we'll push
Okay.
the output to GitHub. So the next time we do that, EmpowerED is going to have a definition on
Oh,
our
okay. Oh, that's
fancy
good to
thing.
know.
And that will probably either this afternoon or Monday, depending on my colleagues and whether they have time.
Okay. And what would success look like to you, maybe for Compendium in next 3 years or five
A
years?
lot more terms with definitions. A lot more people using it. That's what success would look like. People sharing it and saying it's a great thing. Us hearing about people using it. We have Google Analytics set up on the page, so we will be able to know how many people are starting to use it. So that would be, so I think in the next year, 2 years, it would be building the compendium, and then after that, it would be using it and enriching it. But at the moment, it's, as you can see, it's very much in the early stages, and it needs people to contribute to it. So in writing sessions or in sharing sessions or in anything like that.
Yeah, that's perfect. I know I've asked a lot of questions,
Oh, no, that's fine.
and
Anyone else with asking questions?
I'm very inquisitive person, so I like asking. And with Empowered, that ability has grown now. And if any one of you have any questions of contribution you have made, anything you want to ask, please feel free raising your hand or even unmuting yourself and asking directly. Or if you want to put in the chat, you can do that too.
And if you did want to share it with colleagues who you trust, please, for people you trust at the moment, and invite them to contribute. We would greatly appreciate that. And we will probably regularly go in and check whether there's been new developments or changes. And in future, it might be worthwhile doing what you suggest, Anshul, and putting up a more like a form, so that we can get alerted when people change. I think as it snowballs, that's probably going to become more important.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're talking scalability or something, if you're at a
Yeah,
bigger conference or something, managing a form becomes difficult at times.
yeah,
Whereas contribution through, sorry, managing a
yeah. This kind of,
document
yeah,
becomes difficult, but yeah, Excel still is doable.
yeah.
And definitely share with my colleagues. Yeah, even I'll share with my colleagues. And either people can even do it as an independent activity also, like take the document from here because it's a collaborative document anyways, and then ask other colleagues to contribute.
Yeah. No, you can. You can. I mean, it's free. There's open for people to
Yeah.
contribute to anytime now. Um,
But just to confirm and for data security, do you still have a copy of this somewhere? Because if what
as I
if
say, it's
somebody
got
messes with the data?
versioning on it, so we can
Okay,
always
okay,
roll
that's
it back
good.
to a previous
A
version.
previous version of that helps
Yeah.
because
So
yeah, I was just
all
wondering.
yeah, all Google Docs come with versioning. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why we chose it, because it comes with that, but also that it's probably much easier for people to access than Microsoft
Yeah.
ones, across the board. We have in our university, we have a writing sessions set up on Friday mornings. And so one of the things that I was thinking was taking this there and continuing to add terms and enrich it that way.
So how long have you been working on this project, if I may ask?
We only started it in April, so we've not been
Oh,
doing
so
it
it's
for very long. Yeah, we
okay.
had this idea. So actually, I mean, we've worked on a similar idea for a couple of years. So a couple of years ago, we had an idea for a project on the hidden curriculum, but not for students, but for staff, because certainly in our university, and I'm sure it's the same with everybody else, that new staff come or new colleagues come, and there's just things like, for instance, what's a VLE? Okay, well, it's Moodle, but actually, no, there's also all these other things that a student needs to have in their virtual learning environment, um, or things like, what is the term SoTL, for instance, or Scholarship of Learning and Teaching. So we have a lot of terminology but we had struggled with understanding, and then we thought that one project we could do is make a kind of draw together a hidden curriculum set of terms for staff, but then we evolved it into a compendium for Scholarship of Learning and Teaching. And we started thinking about the idea in December, and then we did that intense work for a couple of weeks to set up how we're going to do it, and then we ran the session at our Learning and Teaching conference. So, and then
Okay.
since then we've just shared it locally, but we're now sharing it more widely, and we'll continue to do that.
That's perfect. And I can see that from this session, there has been contributions, some contributions.
Yes. So what I'm going to do is in the front of it, so something I still need to do is in the front of the compendium, which is also the other thing that we'll do is like taking it for we have an overview section, but I'm going to have a little section after that is about the different making sessions, so that we can link, for instance, this Empower session to
Yeah.
that and things like that. So that's kind of like a plan. So it's pretty much still in a work in progress. And maybe I can come back in a year and we can review the progress then.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope there'll be a lot of terminology and people would be using as a glossary somewhere.
And yeah.
And do you think that having a shared vocabulary will influence how scholarship of teaching and learning research is valued or recognized within different institutions?
Well, I'm hoping so, because that is very often one of the things that people worry about, how their scholarship feeds in. I mean, selfishly for us, as I say, our promotions are tied to scholarship. And
Yeah.
so for us, it's a kind of like any opportunities we can have to speak with colleagues about scholarship, and about what they've done and about how they've published and what they've published, um, and the different meanings of different things. That's always an opportunity for us to kind of like make those connections that we want. So we're seeing it as a platform from which things can build rather than as an end product. And I think we're nearly at the end of the session.
Yes.
An hour seems to have gone quite quickly.
Yes. Thank you so much, Helena, for your participation and making the session very interactive. I know not everybody contributed who were in the call, but yes, but having this resource there would be really helpful. And I'm sure some people can even take it elsewhere. And three people have added their names already.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
just wondering if you have contributed and forgot to add your name, please ensure you to add your name to the document also. And thanks once again, Helena. And I would encourage everybody to give a virtual applause for Helena for the wonderful interactive session.